You are the beautiful community, and your job is to help me breathe, and my job is to help us get to know each other a little bit better over the next 10 minutes by doing a Proust questionnaire, which is just like a bunch of personal quickfire questions. I'm going to Google them up without looking at them ahead of time, and you're going to pick one question that you're going to ask of yourself and answer for yourself in the comment section if you feel like leaving a comment to add to the mutual efficacization of the process we're engaged in. So let's Google Proust questionnaire. We're going to click through on whatever link comes up first. They take different forms. Sometimes they're longer or shorter. We've got one. What is your perfect idea, your idea of perfect happiness? Well, beautiful community, one thing that is super weird about us is that we relate to happiness via emojification. It's a smiley face to us very often, which is a consumerist evasion of what the ancients would have thought about it. Now, the ancients thought, God, I'm absolutely horrific at answering questionnaires like this. Vlad, you've got to be brief. Okay, I'm going to try to get briefer. So is he actually answering? No, he started talking about ancient Greece again. I think we need to turn over the channel. The ancients thought two interesting things about it. What they thought is that happiness is a matter of something experienced across a life as a whole, not just something you feel on a Tuesday. Some of them thought that it was a psychological state experienced from beginning to end of a life. But others actually thought that you couldn't reduce it to psychological state, that it had to be fundamentally about whether the life was objectively successful, even if a person deluded about their life thinks that it is when it isn't. But basically, it's about a life gone well in the ancient world. The trouble is that that's not a value that's suddenly gone. It's not a value that they needed, but we don't, because we are like them in many ways. So for me, of course, I've forgotten the question now. What's your idea of perfect happiness? My idea of perfect happiness is if you've managed to keep on becoming you across a life that's long, because you got lucky with your health, and in the course of that, you've grown into being able to give and receive what it is appropriate for you to give and receive. And you've realized yourself across a life lived out at length in such a way that at the end of it you can say, if I went now, it would be appropriate. You don't want to take the tragedy out altogether, but there is such a thing as acceptance. And acceptance means that you have lived a life that was sufficiently conscious across enough of its moments of mortality. I mean, to cut it short, a self-realization across time that leads you to acceptance of death. That's basically what I'm talking about. What's your greatest fear? My greatest fear is easy. It's premature death or such a profound diminution of functioning that all my capacity, not just to sit and stand, is extinguished, but even to communicate minimally with the culture is extinguished. 3. What's the trait you most deplore in others? Boring. Needless harm generated on a large scale. I deplore humans who do that. We know quite a few in the public eye. What's the trait you most deplore in yourself? Oh, missed one. It's hard for me to answer because I like myself. I like being in my own mind. I don't like myself the way narcissists do, but I like myself in the sense that in so many ways I feel joyously at home in my mind. But I think one thing that comes to mind is that my illness ratchets up my nervous system, even though by character I'm a very stable and calm person. So having a racy mind as a result of autonomic dysregulation is very weird for me, because it's out of character, right? Because if I'm in a plane that's falling out of the sky, I'm going to stay calmer than others. But at the same time, I can sit in bed, have calm thoughts, but yet have a racy mind. So that's the thing I don't like about myself. But I do rather externalize it. I mean, I don't fully experience it as a character trait, and more as a sort of a pressure on my nervous system that the illness generates, that I then combat with meditation. Which living person do you most admire? Always Alfred Brendel is the answer, the great musician and cultural figure who died recently. So now I have to say someone new. I would say Chuck Taylor, the philosopher, who's also in his 90s. Why? Because of his remarkable openness and his capacity to feel his way into what any other person in our culture, in a very different culture, is experiencing, without letting go extremely robust standards of truthfulness and rigor. And also just a kind of a spectacular unself-consciousness when it comes to positioning himself as a philosopher and public intellectual. What's your greatest extravagance? My greatest extravagance is probably wine, because I am too sick to even have a sip of it most days, but I still think about it. I sometimes save up a little bit to buy a couple of bottles, and I still sometimes spit wine without swallowing it because I'm too sick to drink it. But never alone, only with people who are drinking, if they pay me a little visit. So it's extravagant because it would be utterly shocking to you how profoundly ill I can be, and yet be semi-open to a bottle of wine being opened around me and being given to me to swirl or to smell. And that's really because there is nothing like wine that we eat or drink, because it allows not just a kind of access to what's been done with a particular bit of dirt, but it allows a kind of time travel. You find a good, relatively inexpensive bottle of something from before the petrochemical revolution, something from the 40s, 50s, 30s, and it tastes transportational and haunting, and as fresh as a daisy. It's true that there's basically nothing like it. I'm a very big wine elitist. Wine obliterates all other drinks and obliterates all food. And I say that as somebody who is in love with thinking about food, and in love potentially with other beverages. What's your current state of mind? Joy at being in the world. Immense fulfillment at making 4% of the contribution I want to make. Immense frustration at not making the other 96% of it because of my illness. On what occasions do you lie? I never lie in meaningful contexts. Am I capable of lying to a big corporation that claims they've sent me a product I paid for but they didn't, and a quick lie could speed up me getting it? Maybe. As a moral philosopher, what do I think about that? I certainly don't think that you need to rigorously apply the first line of Kant's extraordinary masterpiece, The Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, where he says that the only unqualifiedly good thing in the universe is a good will. there are certain trivial circumstances in which it is neither ethical nor unethical to, you know, not be straight, especially if you're with some kind of, you know, battling some kind of impersonal bureaucracy or institution that's mistreating you. But in meaningful context, I very strongly recommend not lying. Although there's a very important conversation about things that don't necessarily need to be said, in what context that applies. What do you dislike most about your appearance? It's difficult for me, as ill as I am, to dislike anything about my appearance. If I dislike anything, it's that I often have a red face, which is about me eating things I'm not allowed to eat, which is about 90% of foodstuffs, but I still sometimes enjoy. Which living person do you most despise? I don't have one in mind, but it would be the one who has caused the greatest deal of needless harm, right? We could talk about North Korea, talk about the Chinese, talk about Putin and Netanyahu and so on. What is the quality you most like in a man? I'll tend to like the same qualities in men and women to a good extent, but I want them expressed differently. If we're talking about heterosexual men, heterosexual women, and it then slightly changes, particularly with gay men. I would look for other qualities, beautiful qualities too. I would say that in a man, just like in a woman, I look for generosity. But let's pick a quality that's more distinct. In a man, I would be very impressed always, and feel kind of uplifted by justified confidence. There is so much unjustified confidence in the world. Just the world's full of that. Justified confidence. What quality do you most like in a woman? Generosity. And then let's be a bit more feminine distinctive. The capacity to hold somebody emotionally, especially if they're going through a lot, without doing it in a sentimental way. So I'll give you an example. Let's take my illness as an example. It's a tragedy that you're ill, Vlad. It's beyond words. But you're in a world in which there are human beings with contingent and frail constitutions, and certain things happen to them, and one of these things has happened to you. Now, of course, there can then be outrage about why politically a certain problem hasn't been fixed, but that's a separate conversation. Which words or phrases do you most overuse? Beautiful. Remarkable. Maybe I don't overuse remarkable. You see, I'd say I don't overuse beautiful. And I use the word love a lot, because there are many different kinds of love. And love for me starts at a very early threshold. If you care about somebody in a way that you would really go out of your way to do something for them, love has already come into your dynamic. That's a very different kind of love to the love in a magical, extraordinary, lifelong friendship, but it's a love still. Who or what is the greatest love of your life? The pianist Edwin Fischer, Beethoven's Der Belly Variations, my closest friend in the world, with whom I have a relationship on a magical order, so she's like a platonic love of my life. My partner, my other close friend who died 12 years ago, I mean, I could just go on listing paintings now, but let's call it a day on that. When were you happiest? Happiest in a sort of a kitsch, sentimental way, probably 25, 24 years ago, when I was surrounded by something that's not quite possible anymore, a kind of diffuse academic department, which was actually the School of International Development at the University of East Anglia, which was the best one in the country together with SOAS. I think better than SOAS at the time, because it was what it would have been in the 70s, still informal, still not drowned in bureaucracy. It was all of these people from different parts of the world, constantly traveling to different parts of the world, with visceral experiences, often experiences of profound disadvantage, and interacting with it, trying to interact with it constructively. And that community was more narcissistic than I would have liked to admit, more superficial and self-indulgent than I would have liked to admit. But it was still kind of magical. It was almost the last point in which you could have had a department, an academic department. It was really a community with students and academics mixing together. So something about it that almost felt out of time. But putting aside sentimentality, obviously the answer is going to be, despite the new layer of tragedy in my life over the last 3 months, that's turned my life further upside down, I would still say right in this moment, because I always grow and I'm always freer every single week. And that means that I'm always more myself. And because of that, also because I'm breathing and able to talk to you, I'll say I'm the happiest I've ever been now. Which talent would you most like to have? So I'm not talent jealous. I am potentially talent envious in a very limited respect. That's to say, if I'm seeing a talent out there that is very close to the talent I am developing, I could learn from it and sort of build it into myself. But there's very little I want to be good at that I'm not good at, really. Well, let's just challenge myself on that a bit. Why not challenge me? Name something. I mean, it's ludicrous in my current context, because my aspiration is to be able to sit in my wheelchair for more than 5 minutes. But I would love to cook much more than I have done in recent years. Cooking is very important to me. It's something that gives me great joy, and even thinking about it gives me great joy. I'm capable of lying in bed for half an hour and trying to concoct the best way to make linguine vongole and write some rules about how to do it and so on. So that means a lot. And I think I was doing a little bit of it when health allowed in the past. And I loved cooking for groups of people. And then another thing that I'll never be able to do, but even if I were well, I would never learn to do, it would need a kind of alternate life, is to dance. It'd be nice to be able to dance beautifully. But even if I were fully healthy, I wouldn't invest time in learning to do that. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? One thing would be that I wish I'd worked on certain things that I needed to work on psychologically earlier. Because my problem was that I did need to work through some issues, let's say when I was 20, but because I was not at all anxious and not at all depressed and very confident and loved life, it wasn't clear to me that I had issues at that time. But I did, and I did need to work on them. So that's one thing. I think another thing would just be to have massively invested in the prevention of worst case scenarios arising when my health was a bit better, rather than trying to push myself. What do you consider your greatest achievement? I think possibly non-publicly, it's that even though life has nearly asphyxiated my capacity to do philosophy, I improve at almost a dizzying rate as a philosopher, week by week, even when I do virtually no philosophy. Like a much greater rate than a professional philosopher, improves. So I'm very blessed about that. Publicly, I think as a very minor public intellectual who does a lot wrong and still has a huge amount to learn, it's my capacity to make people feel more safe in the world without coddling them with superficially reassuring, escapism. So truthfulness and groundedness. So I'm proud of how I imbue that in a small number of people who watch me. If you were to die and come back as a person or a thing, what would it be? Oh God, I don't know. I'm probably not humorous enough right now to answer this well. Where would you most like to live? In Europe. And I feel I live in Europe. More specifically, I wouldn't mind a small place in London and a slightly bigger place in East Sussex. I don't have a place in East Sussex, but that's life. What's your most treasured possession? It'd be things that have touched people, that have people have physically touched. So it wouldn't be some kind of, object that I use and love a lot, like good speakers or good headphones. It'd be something that's been touched. So maybe limited edition signed prints from artists I greatly admire. Not books, interestingly, because I have a completely transactional relationship with books unless they underline. But then it's the underlining that matters, not the sacred value of the book itself. What do you regard as the lowest depth of misery? I would say a combination of profound physical illness and profound mental illness. What's my favorite occupation? Doing philosophy. Hearing a piece of music in my head, although hearing is quite the wrong word, that is not a particular performance of it, right? So having an interior experience of a piece that's not tied to any particular realization of it in sound. My public intellectual work, which I do with your beautiful community, because it's a joy. And then thinking and looking and listening. And talking too much. What's your most marked characteristic? Well, it's my groundedness. But I think in a way that would strike people as almost weird, my most marked characteristic is when in a social context with me, a certain question arises, how ready I am to put on the table a serious understanding about what it would actually mean, what qualifications you'd need to have to answer that question properly. And I'm a lot better at that. I was absolutely horrific at that. Right, 20 years ago, I would just shoot down people at dinner parties who would say things about Shakespeare or Aristotle, which they weren't qualified to say. What do you most value in your friends? Being seen and seeing them for who they are. Acceptance of singularity is central to friendship. And acceptance of singularity that strengthens your friend is of the essence of what friendship is. Then I would say Loyalty, but not loyalty out of loyalty, loyalty out of love. Who are your favorite writers? I don't have unique opinions. I mean, I would begin giving you a list that starts with Shakespeare and be quite predictable. Who is your hero of fiction? I don't think like that, so I'm not sure I could quite give that answer. Which historical figure do you most identify with? I don't like to think about that. I don't. I'm just uninterested in that question. Who are your heroes in real life? Well, my ego ideals, not my heroes, are Alfred Brendel, and in philosophy, Richard Wollheim, for bringing together psychoanalytic understanding of the mind and philosophy, and Bernard Williams for a really staggering adequacy of philosophical process. And genuine mastery of philosophical habit, when to slow down, when to hurry up, when to give an analysis, when to give an analogy, so on. What are your favorite names? I struggle with names because they come and go in fashions. I mean, 25 years ago, you could have made the case that Maya was, sorry to Maya's watching, that Maya was a beautiful name. But then there were 7 trillion Mayas, chewing gum and wearing fake tan, and the name rather went out of fashion. So it changes. What is it that you most dislike? Well, that sounds like a trivial question. What do I dislike? I dislike berries with chocolate. So the idea of like a raspberry brownie is appalling to me. It feels like a violation of both chocolate and raspberry. I hate vegan meat substitutes because vegan food is amazing. Eating vegan can take you a very, very, very long way. You don't need to recreate sausages with it. What do I dislike? What do I dislike? I dislike lots of little things. The reason I really dislike big things is because disliking big things, unless they're really humans being harmed, then I do dislike them, is a bit misanthropic. I don't want bad music making to be replaced by good music making everywhere. I don't want bad philosophy to be replaced by good philosophy everywhere. That would be a world that's not human. It would be a world without human beings. It would be a misanthropic nightmare. What's your greatest regret? I don't have great regrets straightforwardly because it's very difficult to de-link all the things you love and all the things you don't like about your past. So I think that it would all be about the various ways I've become free that could have happened earlier but didn't, and also the way that could have, freed up or uplifted or not impacted in a certain way people in my life if I were myself and free at 25 as opposed to 35. I looked very myself and very free at 35, but I wasn't quite. I had just got there. No, I mean I looked myself and free at 25, but I wasn't. But I looked it, but I wasn't. How would you like to die? Not prematurely, not radically prematurely. What's your motto? oh, I'm going to steal this from a very beautiful man, who's a psychoanalyst. Be open to the possibility of being surprised. Lots of love.